Hello, everybody. This is MangoTango here with NightHydra, and today
You
we're going to
forgot who
talk
you
about.
were for a second.
Yeah, I totally did. That happens some days where I just go, "Who am I?" It's an existential
Who
crisis.
who do I want to be today?
Well,
Hey, this is Night Hydra. This is what I like to call a disposable episode. This is more just anecdotes and hanging out, um, without just taking context out of it. In a time where many of us are either bored or going stir crazy, I wanted to kind of talk about some anecdotal stuff, just like, hey, I have a great story about this one card, or hey, I have some opinions about this card. So this is not really advice. This is more just shooting the breeze and talking about some stories. And I'll let Mango start.
so basically, looking at some of the cards, because this week Arena is here's 60 cards, build the best 30 card deck you can. One of the cards that I'm looking at right now is Citadel Raven. It's a 1 gold card, 3/3, with Airborne and Blitz. The key to this card is that it's when this card attacks. So if you do play it and then Blitz with the attack, you get to return the card whenever it attacks, which is an event card, from your discard pile to your hand. Your opponent has no opportunity to respond to that. You get the card back. So you're spending your 1 gold to guarantee you're getting a recall of something out of your graveyard or out of your discard pile. How do you feel about it?
I like sometimes how you can get like a rage back or something. Like, for example, there are times that I've done it where I have attacked, my gold's open. I've attacked, use a rage, go wild, some sort of obviously a zero cost buff, and I'll either get in or I won't, whichever. And then I end up then going like, oh, well, I got in. Citadel Raven attack, pull back the same pump I just used. Obviously, again, it has to be a zero because I'm using my gold in the Citadel Raven, and possibly again for say another 7 out of nowhere. Arguably, let's just say use Thought Plucker, just for the sake of discussion, use Thought Plucker. If you use a Rage or Go Wild and Thought Plucker, you're dealing 5 points. Okay, then you do Citadel Raven, pull that thing back, attack again, deal another 7. You just dealt 12, all but out of nowhere. They were expecting to take 1, maybe have to fight with you about some stuff. And if you did your pump on the Thought Plucker before you attacked, that means they're not going to be able to shoot it in response, or not, sorry, react and kill it in the same time.
Yeah, it's one of those cards that it's kind of underrated in picks, especially when you're looking at like a pile of cards where you have to make the best of what you can. And when you can start taking things, even if it's not a zero, but it's a really powerful card that, let's say, turn. Taking turn and gaining control of a creature and being able to bring turn back and let your opponent know that that card's back in your hand and now they have to play around it all over again can be one of those things where they might not make an optimal play or they might be trying to start baiting it out. So now they're stuck thinking in a direction that you want as opposed to a direction that you don't want. So to me, it's one of those cards that you can definitely have a lot of play with, and you can do a lot with it. So it's not something to be taken lightly.
No, I think because obviously this direct comparison is going to be Memory Spirit. If you're giving me Dark Draft and you send me, or it's for, let's just say it's here's the 5, so you only get one of these cards. I'm actually going to take Memory Spirit for 2 reasons. The ambush is a huge part of it. The larger stats are another. Now, Citadel Raven, abusable over and over again, obviously. But if you put down a 5/4 airborne, that's a threat in and of itself. A 3/3 airborne, yes, no, kind of. Rescue Griffin, unfortunately, can eat the Citadel Raven stock. It's not going to eat, the Memory Spirit. But I mean, we are arguing a bit of semantics, but but that's the point of the episode. Hey, here are some quaint little cards that sometimes do more than you think. And I've had some very good results with Citadel Raven, but I won't lie and say I didn't wish Memory Spirit was that card every time. But that's a different discussion point right there.
No, it's entirely able to go down that route, and then let's say you got both. You're never going to complain about having both. It's where
No.
you're stuck choosing to have one over the other, and then you get into that position where your opponent's playing the other against you now. You're like, well, I really wish I could have taken that too.
One of the ones that it might, and this is one of those things where it is a read the card sort of moments. Faithful Pegasus. Now, I'm going to read this off because it needs to sink in. Because when you see this text, you would make assumptions that it does something, but it does more than that. It is a 0 cost, 2 attack, 2 defense, good airborne blitz, tribute. So when this comes into play, you get to recycle. All this is good so far. When this champion attacks or blocks, because that's the part I miss every time, one of your human champions may gain airborne this turn and attack or block with this card. The first time I saw someone use this defensively, I'm like, is this a bug? I just after playing so many years of other card games, I didn't think it gave airborne on blocking, but it did. And I'm like, and I honestly, I was like, wow, this is slightly better than I thought. It was one of those things where it was Master Zoe, who gets indestructible when he blocks or attacks. I was like, this is going to go badly.
Well, one question that goes along with that, since it says when this attacks, and then it gives that the ability to, whenever it gives airborne and attack, does that allow it to deal with cards that don't have blitz? And maybe assign blitz outside of it?
No, it does not.
Okay.
Basically, the way you would work this in the app, you would drag it and the human up into your attack zone, hit attack, and then it prompts you, do you want to give target human airborne? Is this the human you want to give airborne?
Okay, that it makes sense in that aspect. It's just one of those things where when you read the card, it is one of those things where the wording can sometimes throw people off, so I figured I might as well bring that up as just a discussion point.
I don't know. It is. It is. I want to more mention that what's entertaining for me, because it only works on human champions, not human tokens. It works on all human champions. If I see one of these in a constructed match, I can reasonably predict probably a third of their deck. It's stuff like you'll see Master Zoe, you'll see what's her name, Alara. Let me bring her up. Not Alara. Where is she? Not Helion. I'm looking in Sage. Da 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 da. Oh, I can't find her now. Anyway, it's the 10-8. Sorry, here we go. Knight of Alara. That's what it is. Knight of Alara.
You could also see it with Lord of the Arena.
I've seen Lord of the Arena, and I for some odd reason, I always assume that when he gets the indestructible, he also gains breakthrough, and he doesn't. I forget how this card works, and I keep every time since the inception of the game, I just forget how he works.
No, it's definitely true, and it's one of those things where there have been times where I've picked Master Zoe because of his wording of saying must be blocked.
You can watch. Sorry about that. It's its own thing. So give me another hilarious highlight from you, because I mean we're just talking about some dredge. I can tell you that now.
I do enjoy Time Bender. I feel that there are some times where he does not get enough love as far as what he can do. So he is a 1 gold, 2/4 sage human mage creature or champion with ambush. Loyalty 2 blitz. Tap, you can banish target 0 champion, or tap and return target champion to its owner's hand. And a lot of that is it doesn't specifically mention that it can't be your own creature. So if there's certain things that you want to have re-trigger, such as like Misguide Herald, where you're stuck with no creatures in hand, you're not really in a position where you're going to really want to spend your gold on any of the cards in your hand as they're more reactive instead of proactive. Being able to, let's say, throw Misguide Herald right back into your hand, or even attack with the Misguide Herald and then throw it back in your hand after they've declared a blocker, so that you're using it for more tricks than what most people understand that you're going to be doing with it.
Timebender is one that I think the biggest issue is that if you're talking constructed, you almost want it to be where is it? Temporal Enforcer, because Temporal Enforcer is a major threat, whereas Timebender is definitely more of a sort of control card. And then for Limit, whether it's Singleton Constructed, Dark Draft, or Random 30s, obviously you have no control over Random 30s. The loyalty to, I mean, at least, yes, it has Ambush, but
You don't always need to trigger it for the Blitz, but it is nicer to get it triggered for the Blitz and being able to either banish or return something on their turn, and then being able to use it again on your turn.
yeah, but obviously that's a one-time window where you get like if you want to call it the double tap, where you can use it once on theirs and once on yours, because obviously after that it's always expended. But no, it's a card that I when I first started playing, I was very I don't want to use the term enamored, but I wanted to see how well this card worked, because from a long time ago during our Magic playing days, there was a very similar card that dominated a few formats because no one was ready for how to play for it, or the answers weren't as prevalent. Here in Epic, I mean, a 4 defense means it's not going down to Fireball, Wolf Bite, that sort of stuff, but it is also using up your gold. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. The fact that it can banish a 0 means it can handle a Muse, it can handle a Dark Knight or a Guilt Demon, send those away forever, which is good.
Oh, definitely. Being able to get rid of select creatures or even tokens that have been pumped in a way, or certain things that
Well,
are
you can
just
just
in your way.
well for tokens. Either ability works on tokens, but the fact that it can banish a 0 means you can means that like Dark Knight. I understand that's a very narrow point of view, but Dark Knight it's still a good card. Like that's the whole thing, is that Dark. What?
No, I
No.
can definitely see that, and I can see it's one of those cards that I feel like it has so many. It's like a utility card, so there's so many options that you can make it work, but there are times where you're like, I don't need it, and I wish this was a end the game card as opposed to maybe saying that it's more towards the idea of winning more.
Well, that and I don't think it's winning more, but it's at best it's a stabilizer. It's never going to win the game because you're just not going to attack with it. You might block with it once. You're never going to attack with it. You're always just using, now mind you, you're always just using its expendability to handle one threat. So it's basically a one for one. But in order to get immediate value, it also needs loyalty too. Like there are so many things stacked against it versus, say, Temporal Enforcer. And I say that because Temporal Enforcer being a 6/4 unblockable, I'll play that without loyalty. I'll just put it in at the end of their turn and go, hey, I've got 6 power coming in unblockable. I'm gonna probably take you down a peg or two. I'm not. This is not going to do that. And I think that's where the trade-off is. If you were doing a very stage heavy, like let's say you take one of the quest decks where it's like, hey, you need all stage cards, or whatever, then yes, I can see it coming in. But over Temporal Enforcer is just better without loyalty too. Whereas this is a surprise blocker. But the worst part of that is Temporal Enforcer without loyalty is also still a 4 defense but a 6 power surprise blocker. So, literally, unless you have loyalty to, this isn't doing as much. And if you do have loyalty to, they both still get, the one free bounce. It just, it's eerily similar in the fact that I don't think that they were watering it down. But, if we ever start talking about, like a card that should have been like half a gold, this feels like a card that could have been like either half a gold or maybe it had tribute draw card, something like that.
No, I could definitely see, or tribute recycle on it would be awesome.
Well, the thing is, though, recycle, from off the top of my head, recycle isn't on gold cards. It's only on the zero cards. Now, again, I'm sure there's something in there where I'm not remembering things right. Oh, plague has it on its one ability. You can recycle on your opponent's turn. But anyway, recycle is usually on a zero to kind of make it, to kind of pseudo give it the ability to draw a card. But yes, if they wanted to, because plague already breaks the rule of having recycle on a gold card, I think having recycle would have been fine. Or if they ever decide, play with how many cards to recycle, and I don't think they're ever going to. Recycle is very clearly just set in stone of it's 2 cards. All that aside, let me try and find let's use some old timey language. Let's find a zinger. Let's go to Sage. Not Sage. Let's go to Wild because everyone knows something about Wild. Most of the zeros, we can easily digest the zeros. Feeding Frenzy we can digest. You know what? Savage Uprising. Savage Uprising. Savage Uprising. The reason that this card catches me is I was running Pedro's list, and he has since changed it. I want to get him on, but since he's from a way different time zone, that's going to take a little while.
What time zone is he from?
I think he's from Europe. I do not want to offend him and say which area of Europe, but I've only caught him at we're Eastern Standard, just for the listeners. I've only caught him at 8 to 10 a.m.
Yeah, so that would probably be like a Saturday morning kind of thing.
We'll have to. I definitely want to get him on. I want to talk to probably as many people from that March event as possible, just because they have experience that we don't. Anyway, all that aside, Savage Uprising. The reason I like this card, so this is very similar to Hurricane. Now, so let's wow, sorry, allergies. Let's dissect why it's like and why it's not like Hurricane. So for 1 gold, Savage Uprising will deal 9 damage to each 1 gold champion. So will not deal the damage to tokens ever. Just won't happen. Its alternate mode is deal 5 damage to a player and draw a card. Okay. Now, Hurricane can either draw 2 cards or deal 9 damage to all champions. Where this breaks down is that Savage Uprising can miss their tokens. Okay, but it can also miss all of your zeros. Let's just say you have an Ankylosaur, which was in his deck. So the number of times you can miss your Ankylosaur, you can miss your Fire Shaman, and clear a path for them is up there. You'll leave behind your Wolf tokens. And in many of the constructed games I was playing it in, I wasn't seeing tokens from a lot of people. I might see something small here or there. But the fact that the alternate mode of the Savage Uprising is deal 5 to someone in the face and then it replaces itself, Hurricane can draw 2 cards in a pinch. It is very much a control card because it either sweeps the board or sweeps most of the board, maybe leaving behind some of your wild champions with huge rears, or you have this, I guess I want to call it, you either sweep or you just draw 2 cards. So it falls into the classic category of Divine Judgment, of Apocalypse. It's either a draw 2 when you need it, or or it can sweep, not leaving many survivors. Savage Uprising can be built around, but the fact that it can deal 5 to a player in a pinch, if they spend their gold in their turn on something like, let's say they Kong, they blow out one of your guys, you don't have anything better to do, clearly Savage Uprising isn't going to kill their Kong, lower their life total, get the card back. You're not down a card like you would with, say, Flame Strike. So this can keep you in cards in hand. It can deal, it can start to chip away damage. And in Pedro's list, where I really think it fit in, the deck just put direct damage probably 1 in every 2 cards was able to deal direct damage to a player, and that was just being able to stay in that card economy. If I've got nothing better to do at the end of your turn, I don't want to play my Strafing Dragon for whatever reason. I can't play my Draka. I don't have a surprise attack. Dealing 5 to them and keeping the same number of cards in hand is a pretty good use of your gold when your deck just wants to knock people out.
No, it's definitely one of it. It falls into the line of why we both like Pyromancer, with having its gold ability being able to put 4 on a target. It gives you options that don't feel like you're not progressing the game down the path that you want to go to. Because when you're spending a gold and a card just to get 2 cards, so you're going up a card, it kind of hurts when you're feeling that you really need to be advancing the game in a forward position. So being able to have the Savage Uprising, which is spending the gold and the card to replace itself in your hand, and also put a significant chip when you're talking about a sixth of a life total. And if you're in wild, you're definitely playing something that has some big bodies or some other ways to put direct damage onto the opponent. So it all continues to gradually get you to the end goal as opposed to delaying that end goal. Kind of like the argument that we were just having over the 2-4 versus 6-4 when they have similar effects.
Well, but also one of the things that I don't know if a lot of people consider, Hurricane does next to nothing versus a Kark deck. Or let me rephrase that, your stereotypical Atlanta-style Kark deck. This can keep them off of that very scary 45 life total, which, for those of you who aren't as familiar with the Atlanta build, 45, they can still win out, in one turn. They can, cast Brand, gain 5 off that, or cast Second Wind, gain 5 off that, and then gain 10 off Kark and win. This can keep them at, say, 38. 38 means they can't do it in 2 cards. They have to do it in 3 or 4. It can buy you another turn. And it's why I like the card so much.
Well, also, they're dealing the same amount of damage. So if you're dealing 9 damage and the board it has stuff like Raging T-Rex on it, or Rampaging Worm, or just other things that you really can't clear, I'd rather have the ability to put the damage and replace itself on your opponent, as opposed to not being able to clear and only going up an additional card.
Well, they each clearly have their own place. I want to say that. Can they both go in the same deck? They can, but they very often will not. Um, it's just, do you want the extra damage? Do you want the ability to avoid zeros? And I think Pedro's deck was hitting that sweet spot. I think that was their way of both conceding card economy, sweeping power, but also the ability to dome someone out of nowhere. And I also like, and it's just my play of the deck. I was asking about, and he has made some significant changes to his build. But that build he played in March, because it avoids the Ankylosaur, that is so important to me. And it hasn't happened often. It's only happened like twice to me. But where you can leave a 7/7 breakthrough sitting behind and take out a lot of their board, sometimes that's really impressive. And the fact that, well, actually, Wild doesn't have this problem. Other like Evil or Good have this problem, where many of their sweepers only happen on your turn. Both Hurricane and Savage Uprising can happen on your opponent's turn. You can still clear on their turn. It's just limited to 9 points. But if they're like, oh, I'm going to do all this stuff, you go, I'm just going to sweep out most of your board, leave behind my Ankylosaur. I feel pretty good. And then if you trigger a Fire Shaman, you trigger Fire Shaman.
No,
But anyway,
it
that's
definitely
my
has its
tirade on that.
place. And it does feel, it almost feels like you want to run it more often over Hurricane, because Hurricane kind of feels like you're trying to trigger loyalty, so you're not taking one of the other ones that do banish or break, as opposed to Savage Uprising being in there because of its direct damage and having an alternate mode.
Yeah. So I understand those are very unpithy response, but I've said most of what I want to say about it. So give me another great one. Give me another sleeper hit or one that has a great story behind it.
Well, let's see here.
I know that's the whole thing. When you realize the game has a good number of cards until you start looking for cards, and you're like, "What do I have that's unique?" Wow, I've seen all these cards now. They're Dark Draft or something like that. And you're like, "I've seen all these cards. What stands out?"
Demonic Rising is one that's fun.
Oh, it is, especially after seeing that March deck by I want to say it was General Gyre, or at this point, I'm attributing it to the username General Gyre, but I believe that's who it was. The Demonic Rising deck, and every time I see it, sorry, you know what? I'll let you tell your version because this was your pick. So if you tell your
Oh,
version, then
definitely.
I'll wax poetic.
Oh, having drafted good tokens where it just kept producing random little tokens out of nowhere and being like, okay, 1 or 2 damage doesn't really matter. I'll let you do it. And then being able to go, well, hey, I've attacked you with everything. I've forced all your blockers. Let's go Demonic Rising and wipe all the 15 tokens I've made and throw a bunch of 4/4s at you while you only have 2 or 3 blockers to deal with the 15 4/4s that are now coming at you individually. So it's been
Well,
a fun win.
what I would say about the constructed portion, I see this deck coming because either people don't play it slow or they play it very obviously. My example would be Urgent Messengers. So Urgent Messengers, this is not my pick, so don't hold that against me.
Nope,
One
totally
gold,
holding
draw two
against you.
cards. Yeah, you're like, you better talk about Urgent Messengers. No, but it's 1 gold, put in 2 humans, draw 2 cards. If I see them use this on their turn, it's in one of 3 decks. It's either a Kark deck, and because I've done this myself, you just want to draw 2, and it's one of your draw 2s. It's in a Demonic Rising deck. I'll cover that in 1 second. Or it's in some sort of human/tokens build. Now, obviously, Demonic Rising covers in with tokens, but if you see them play this card during their turn, that means they're trying to set up next turn on their turn doing a huge Demonic Rising. You'll see something stupid like they'll play. Let's say, let me find Insurgency. If they play Insurgency on your turn, which doesn't make as much sense because it gives human tokens Blitz and Unbreakable and this +1. You're like, well, this token doesn't do as much on my turn as it does on its controller's turn. If they play Insurgency on your turn, you're like, oh, you're going to play Demonic Rising in a second. And for me, I've always been playing a Kark deck whenever I see this happen. I just laugh because I'm like, I have a Banishing board wipe, I have a Return to Hand board wipe, and I have a Transform board wipe in my hand right now. I honestly don't care what you do because I'm not trying to break your tokens. I'm going to send them away, and I'm going to set you back 3 cards. But Demonic Rising is a build around me card. I've definitely taken it in Dark Draft, mostly because I'm like, if I'm ahead, if they're at, say 4 or something, it'll get in this last 4 points. But you really want to be able to exploit this card. But half the time I take it, I'm like, it's an evil draw 2, and it's better than some of the trash I see in the other colors. So that's from Limited. I'm not saying Constructed. Constructed is definitely a build around me.
Oh, in limited, I've also taken it for if we're at parity as far as the number of creatures on the board, but their creatures are better than mine. I have no problem burning it to break all of their good stuff and just go, well, we're trading and it's a fair board wipe. And then it gives them that option of, well, no, I don't really want to do that. So it does have its way of if you're at parity, but they have better, it's a board wipe. But there are times where if you're overwhelmed, it's not digging you out.
Yeah, it's a win big or go home version of Wave of Transformation. Wave of Transformation, because it puts in just wolves, you're almost always going to play it on their turn. Demonic Rising, you're like, I am never playing this on their turn. I don't want to give them a second attack phase if I can avoid it. Now, obviously, there are random times where if you don't play it, you'll lose the game right here and now, in which case you're playing the wrong deck, but it happens.
Oh, well, there are times where like they have Avenging Angel in play and you're stuck in a position where you need to clear it And that may be your only way right now, especially in a Dark 30 or a draft, where you're like, well, I can't leave it on the board, so I need to get rid of it, and I can do it on their turn.
I'm just searching for my next terrible card because that's at this point I'm just trying to dredge and find the things that are either so fringe or so terrible that they're just absolutely awesome. Oh, here's one: Plague Zombies. So I'll let you bring that one up. 1 gold, put 3 zombie tokens in play. This turn, your zombies gain Blitz, and when this card is broken, deal 2 damage to target player. This thing either needs to be set up or it's some desperation gambit move where it's like, my opponent's going to take 6 damage either way. Shrug, I'd rather have Lightning Storm. But the times I've seen this work, like, let's say they had a Necrovirus. Like, I've seen zombie token builds. I mean, it's out there. I could probably build half of it right now off the top of my head. Let's just say you throw in Murderous Necromancer, you throw in Necrovirus, Plentiful Dead. You can just be like, all right, we're just going to make a bunch of zombie tokens. Okay, whatever. But the times I've seen this played, if I see it played in a dark draft, it's either a desperate blocking move, which is when I play it, or it's some weird aggressive thing where they're like, oh, you're going to take 6 damage. And I just go, 6 damage for 1 gold is not what I'm worried about. I'm worried about Kong. I'm worried about Sea Titan. I'm worried about Avenging Angel. If you want to pay on your turn to get Plague Zombies, if it's not the killing blow, I usually shrug and go, unless you hit me with Burn on my turn, in which case, okay, good game for you. You set up, the Flame Strike or something. But Plague Zombies definitely doesn't concern me, and it's bound to happen. Every game cannot have every card be good. That's just not how that works. But it's a card that just it needs too much work.
No, I could definitely see that. The only other time I could really say is they're attacking with something big and you know you're going to get the 6, or you need to block a few of their threats and be like, well, I have blockers. I need one more turn to survive. It does land that spot where you're trying to protect a combo or protect a win for the next turn. Would I play it as a normal card? No, not really. But if it is in the draft and it's like, oh, well, I may need the bodies.
But if you need the bodies, to me, it always feels like it's. I mean, the Risen. Yes, the Risen. The Risen is the other one. Put 3 zombie tokens into play. Your evil champions gain Blitz, +1 attack, +1 defense. That one was from the original set. It's another card where you go, like, oh, you have three threes in addition to the rest of your force. And yes, the reason the Risen and Plague Zombies can, and I'm using the word can, get a little dangerous are with things like Plentiful Dead, Necrovirus, and Murderous Necromancer. Now, if you manage to get Necrovirus, and I'm going to read the cards just to explain the setup. 1 gold, break target champion. Each player puts a zombie token to play. Okay, shrug, whatever. But if this is in your discard pile and you play a 1 gold evil card, you may banish this card from your discard pile. If you do, put 3 zombie tokens into play. Because Plague Zombies and the Risen give Blitz to all zombie tokens, you could be going in with 3 additional zombie tokens. Okay, if you absolutely had to. But, maybe you have a Drinker in Blood, and at this point, I'm naming, like, if you have a 5-card setup, you can win. I don't feel bad. If I lose to this, bravo to the other player. Absolutely bravo. I think they should be rewarded for their creativity. But these cards, they don't even have a draw 2 option on them. They only do one thing, which is the part that bothers me, because you look at, like, Apocalypse. You can draw 2 or do the effect. These only put zombie tokens into play. There's no alt mode. So if you're getting beaten down by a bunch of dragons in the air, this is not going to fix that problem. That's why I think that's why they're not as seen and constructed, is they only have one use. And obviously, yes, it's to put more damage out or to put out emergency blockers. But if you're using your gold to only get 3 zombies, only, that doesn't feel like it, considering the crazy things we see in this game otherwise, it doesn't feel very advantageous. That's my opinion. But it's also, evil is actually probably my favorite faction in the game. So I'm extremely critical when their cards seem either subpar or seem like they're not holding up their end of the deal.
No, I can definitely see that. And if you do happen to somehow combo in, like you were talking about, of having that trigger and make 6 zombies that all have, when this card's broken, put 2 damage. Now you're talking about throwing significant amount of blockers into play, plus being able to direct 12 damage at your opponent. That may be enough to swing a game, especially if you have something to follow it up to act as a finisher. But it isn't one of those cards where it solves the problem you're in. There are 100 times where you're like, I would rather it be something else, or even replace itself. And that's where you start coming into where putting draw 2 and get 2 humans, you're like, that is a lot better.
And to be fair, I'm sure if these things had recycle stapled onto them, they would be probably fine. They would definitely not be top tier. I don't want to play it like it is. But if you had the option for the card to replace itself, like you weren't losing a card, because that's another part, and we talked about an earlier episode. And I think now that we've got almost 2 months into the app, we can speak with a little more personal experience. I definitely don't want to say authority because it's not authority. We can speak with more personal experience about how important that card in hand economy is. And for these to only be one card from your hand that you'll never get back, it only puts 3 zombie tokens. Like, okay, well, these zombies, whether it's the Risen or Plague zombies, that's all you're getting. You're getting 3 2/2, or possibly 3/3 on the Risen ground pounders. Well, most of these games that constructed are about unblockable. They're about breakthrough. They're about airborne. That doesn't seem like an efficient use. That seems almost like you've handicapped your deck for style points. Now, of course, there's going to be something in the next couple sets that I can't think of that's going to make these things infinitely better. But for right now, I think that's the reason we're not talking about a zombie token deck. Can you believe this zombie token deck is number 1 again? That's not happening.
No, I definitely don't see a zombie token really getting to the end point, unless it's somehow going back to what we were talking about with Demonic Rising, where it may have had those zombie tokens put into play on their or on your opponent's turn. Now you're attacked with them. Now you're Demonic Rising with them to then turn them into demons to get that extra damage through. But it's not like you can combo those 2 cards together simply because of the gold cost. But that gets into a long, weird way of, if you had 2 gold, there's so many better combos.
And that literally is the exact point. And obviously, you and I are on the same page. And we'll move on from this. I don't need to keep hammering home how if this were a half gold or it had recycle or it had something else, it had an alt option. I mean, there are so many other things where I would say this would be better. Because look at, say, Bitten. Bitten, you don't feel bad if you destroy one of their creatures and you give them a zombie on your turn. You're not as concerned about, if I can get one zombie and blow up their champion, I don't, that's not really a big swing. But Bitten also has draw 2. These don't have options. They're inflexible. Yes, you can use them for attacking or blocking. That's the flexibility, is that they have blitz. That's the flexibility, is you get 3 blockers / attackers this turn to push it over the edge. One gives a stat boost, the other one gives an explosion boost. But the flexibility is simply that you're doing multiple tokens and blitz. That's the flexibility that doesn't help you really when you're behind. And so it's an aggressive card. Let's just call it what it is. It's an aggressive card that doesn't feel like it does enough. I'll put it all that way. So give me another hilarious pick, because I apparently just wanted to yell about how 3 zombies isn't worth 1 gold.
Let's see here. Trying to think of one. I mean, I've had decent play experiences with Rabble Rouser, the 5/5 blitz that puts a
oh my
human
god.
token in and then doubles.
Oh god. Oh. All right,
Yeah.
give me the story. Give me
Oh
the story.
no, that's all part of that same story of being able to go, okay, let me put more tokens into play, And if you do somehow happen to have survived with the one that taps for 3, put 3 human tokens into play, and then have
Gladius.
Rabble Rouser come down and go, well, that's now 8 tokens into play on a turn. It can get out of hand kind of quickly. But even the fact that he basically taps for 2, then taps for 4, then taps for 8, if they're not being dealt with, it's an interesting card that kind of gets overlooked a lot, where people don't think of it as the threat that it can be.
Well, the Rabble Rouser, it has 2 parallels to it. You were talking about Gladius, and that's a perfectly viable one, because Gladius does not have Blitz, but he is unbanishable. He's also a 6/11, and he gives +3 to your good champion, so he's got a completely different field. But also Rift Summoner. Now, the reason I say Rift Summoner, they both have Blitz, where the advantage is that Rift Summoner has Ambush, where the disadvantage is Rift Summoner has Loyalty 2 to get the extra token. Now, why I bring that up is because Rabble Rouser times that in Constructed, I think people Pack Alpha and Rift Summoner, Pack Alpha, and Rabble Rouser, because they have Blitz, like, oh, I'm just going to make tokens right away. It's still a 5/5. There are times where one more attacker this turn could push it over. So don't forget that it can attack for 5.
Oh, very much so, where his ability is there kind of as early mid-game, where you need an effect to help you continue progressing forward in the game. But if you do happen to draw him, and you're at that point where you're like, I just need one more body to go through, the fact that he just has Blitz is significant in itself, of being able to come down and force a block somewhere, or force an attack. Because you may want to have a plan for a breakthrough guy, so you're trying to either throw the 5 here, and then maybe using some wild to boost on the back end of one of your other creatures, or even if this creature goes unblocked and you give it +4/+4 and now it's a 9, that is significant. Especially in a game that you have 30 life to really work with, unless you're playing against something that has a decent amount of life gain.
Sorry about that.
No
No,
worries.
well, I think it's because it doesn't have the ambush of Rift Summoner. I mean, over, say, Gladius, in Limited, it's probably on par with Gladius, because Gladius also gives that huge front-end boost to both current and future good champions. But at the same time, Rabble Rouser only being a 5/5, it makes tokens. Do the tokens have Blitz? No. It's because of the speed and how some of these games go. Yes, making a bajillion humans is good, but the downside is we're talking only on your turn because it doesn't have ambush. There are so many hoops to jump through that every time I see it in Constructed, I actually kind of laugh a little bit, only because I don't feel threatened by it, because it basically says, do you have a board wipe? I'm like, usually I do, or I'm going to burn your face out, and Rabble Rouser doesn't prevent either of those. Gladius in Constructed is far more scary to me, because the unbanishable portion means that if I'm playing Kark, for example, or I'm playing Good or whatever, that I can't get it with my board wipes. and the fact that it has this what we call an anthem, an ability to pump your team. Because it has an anthem, Gladius is immediately a threat if you already have a board presence. Rabble Rouser, just like, oh, we're going to make more human tokens. And I shrug and go, okay, well, I guess that's a thing. So, next turn, if you're playing Demonic Rising, I'll be worried. But this turn, you have, as you like to call them, sleepy. You have a bunch of sleepy humans that they're not scaring me. They're 1/1s, and I've seen ones where actually the only time, and this is the true story. This happened. They do Rabble Rouser. They make a metric ton of these tokens. Then they go Blood Drinker, and I'm like, oh no, oh no, oh no. And sure enough, Fall Up with the Wither, I'm like, and that's the game. Only time I'm concerned is if there's like a Blood Drinker in play, and we've hit this crazy point where I'm so far behind anyway that they could have sneezed and won the game.
No, it's definitely one of those cards where I kind of enjoy it because it doesn't get the threat assessment that other cards do.
Well, it doesn't get the threat assessment, only in my opinion, because it's not as threatening. Now, if you're going to ask me, I just talked about Urgent Messengers, and it's like, well, how is Urgent Messengers the same? Urgent Messengers is an event, and it also draws 2. We talk about Gladius. Gladius in Limited, if it's random 30s, Gladius in Limited is more of an annoyance because it's a 6/11 unbanishable than anything else. Rabble Rouser just feels like it falls in this point where it's acceptable and limited and constructed. You better have a really good reason, and if you do, it might still not be enough. Now, obviously, to be fair, we'll fall all this out. It's another one of those cards, like Gladius, where you say, if this survives a whole turn. In Epic, that is a pretty big ask for constructed. For them to go, if this survives a turn, you go, I wouldn't go to the bank on that one.
No, it's also one of those things where you can play it out on your turn, not even use its ability, kind of using it as a check pass, especially if you know you have an Urgent Messenger in hand, or that you have the event that you can put 6 tokens into play.
Yeah, Secret Army or whatever that frig that thing is. It's something. Secret Legion. There we go. Got there. Haha.
Yeah, so if you have somewhere where you know that this is going to kind of work out, and being able to go, well, I just put 6 in, let me put 7, oh, now it's 14, and you've already spent your gold on your turn, I'm playing this at the end of your turn, do you have the board wipe on my turn? It does kind of create those things where there's that false sense of security, where they may play into it, because it doesn't have that threat assessment the same way as you'd have with Gladius.
I'm trying to see if I can dovetail. Oh, so since we're talking about terrible things that put in tokens, Dark Leader. This is part of, like, if you ever wanted like a tier 4. Now, tier 1 is like the decks from March. Tier 2 are the ones that are just on the fringe. Tier 3 are cute but can still win. Tier 4 is you just started or you're trying some terrible deck.
Or you're drafting terribly. And you're just like, I just want a terrible draft deck that makes tokens.
I think a terrible draft would be better than a constructed deck with Dark Leader in it.
True.
So, Dark Leader, 1 gold for a 4/4 ambush blitz, so it's got something. Evil human champion. Your other human champions get +1 attack and are also evil, because apparently he's just as good at this. You can expend it to put 1 human token into play. That's like, it's like, oh, I can come down, do an emergency block. Maybe I'll kill, I don't know, a wolf token and make a human. Huge plays. All my humans get +1 attack, and they're evil. I'm like, in my head, I'm just going, I don't know what the and they're evil has to do with anything besides thematically. I mean, well, sorry. If you also somehow managed to use the Risen on the following turn, I guess we could swing for millions upon millions. But this thing it is the hoops you have to jump through, because when I first started the game in 2016, and was like, hey, what kind of decks are sort of obvious, but build around me. You're like, oh, we'll do a humans, sort of deck. You're like, all right, well, I'll splash for Dark Leader in this human deck because it does have an Anthem ability. It does boost them. And even though it boosts it, even though it has ambush, even though it does make human tokens, this is extremely underwhelming. I mean, I was talking about, the Risen being kind of underwhelming. Well, at least that gives all of your evil, +1 attack, +1 defense. You put in 3 blitzies, zombies out of nowhere, so you can kind of diversify. Plague zombies, when they, if these guys die in combat, they're still going to take 2. This guy, yeah, the body's unimpressive to start with for a 1 gold ambush/blitzer, and it only makes a single token. If this made 2 tokens, sort of like Rabble Rouser, I'd be like, all right, this guy can clog up the board, whatever. But 1 token, and it has to expend to do it. It's not even like a tribute or, like Paris for comparison, is a 0-drop human that makes a human when it comes into play, and whenever you play another 1 gold good card. This doesn't even reward you for being an evil. It doesn't reward you for making almost any effort. This is, I'm sure I'll eat my hat at a later date, but as far as unimpressive cards, this is up there.
No, I can definitely see it. It also has that same kind of feel as like Den Mother, where it makes the tokens, but it's so easy to play around that it's like
Oh, but Den Mother's so good, though.
Den Mother being an 8/8 and having just breakthrough by itself is great. It's the way that you want to break stuff to make it better, but it never really works out that way.
Well, the bigger difference, though, is that Den Mother is pretty good in limited. Even if you're not a wild build around me deck, like you don't have like Jungle Queen or something else. At least if they decide they're going to like sweep your wolves, or you start attacking in, pinging with these wolves, Den Mother can get huge and has breakthrough, and comes in with 3 bodies attached. Yes, it's only on your turn. She doesn't have ambush, but immediately she puts 14 power and toughness immediately on the board across 4 bodies. She herself is huge. It's not like she's just a 2/2 wolf that can die to anything. She doesn't die to fireball. Obviously, now that there's Dark Leader, but everything he does feels like the sum of his parts should be better than what it actually is. And because every time I've seen these, and I have actually played this within the last month, mostly in random 30s, and the main part usually is I have a gold, it's the end of your turn, I've got nothing better to do, I'm actually going to advance the board state. And I'm sure there's probably some discussion about how a check pass is more threatening or a card in hand is more valuable or some stuff like that. But it really just, I would rather probably have almost any other card in the game. In fact, I can't think of too many cards where I would say this is worse than any other card in the game, mostly because it's a 1 gold card. Yes, it has ambush, but most of what it does with ambush is kill zeros. And if you're spending 1 gold to kill zeros, it had better be a Shadow Imp, maybe a Muse. That's about it.
No, I can definitely agree with that.
I've just been picking cards. I'm just ragging them. Then again, I also said evil is my favorite faction, so I'm picking on the cards where I'm like, we deserve 3 different cards for evil. Give me something.
These are the cards I don't ever want to touch.
Well, all right, so quick aside, and I'm only going to do a 30-second rant about it. Dark Assassin. Dark Assassin, I would rather have than probably those other cards. So for 1 gold, 7/2, which really weird stats for that. I'm sure it has to go with, they're an assassin. They can kill players. Sure. Loyalty 2, Blitz. It can expend to break a champion. All right. In the beginning parts of the game, there's some, Magic the Gathering analogies with this and Royal Assassin, this, that, the other thing, blah, blah, blah. This can at least end a game. If you put it down, give it Blitz on open board, they already spent their gold on your turn for some crazy reason. Maybe they played Reset or something or whatever. You can still come in with 7. Still knock them around a little bit. You can also just play it, blow up one of their champions. Okay, cool. The other 3 cards I mentioned, like Plague Zombies can't even deal 2. It doesn't deal 2 damage to a target. It only deals it to a player. So I can't like lose a zombie and take out your muse or something like that. Like I can't even do cheeky stuff like that. This is better than like the. I'd rather have this probably in almost any other more evil focused deck in Constructed. Now, when it comes to limited, that's up for discussion.
No, it
Anyway,
also
sorry.
has those things where it can deal with things that you normally can't deal with. So if you're sitting there against
Like
like a
High
war
King.
machine with a
I was gonna say High
10-10
King,
that's
but
sitting
yes.
out, or a hiking, or if you're sitting there and they played Kong last turn, and you're like, I have no way to deal with it. You know what? This comes down, boom, it shoots it. It's like you attacked and it went for the block, but it was a successful block on your end. So there are a lot of times where Dark Assassin is useful in other ways, especially in reestablishing a board or digging you out, where those other cards really aren't digging you out of a position. You're kind of
Yeah,
getting like
they're
further and further down, like, oh, I spent my gold on this, and they just
yeah,
laugh.
that is definitely you were absolutely correct. That is a lot of the feel bads where you're like, I spent a gold for this. Not only that, I spent a gold and a deck slot for this. Oh, that feels so bad.
No, it does come
Sorry.
down into that same idea of like playing Soul Hunter, where I really enjoy the card. I will play it just because I find it hilarious. But there are a lot of people that go, "Yeah, you should never play that."
All right, fine. You know what? This will be our joint pick of the episode. If I had that little like air horn sound, that would be the moment. I'd be like, Soul Hunter. Both not as bad as you think it is, also not as good as you think it is.
Oh,
Main
definitely
reason?
not good because of if it had ambush or something that could give it a little bit more of an edge. Yes, but it's just that initial gold for a 5/5 that doesn't get a threat into play.
Well, and not to keep harping about other and different games, this is one of those cards you should never be paying a gold for it. At the literal absolute worst, surprise attack, you have nothing better or nothing else you really want to put into play, like something else needs loyalty or whatever. In general, this should be pitched to a frantic digging, or if someone hits you with a Thought Plucker, a Knight of Shadow. But also, one of the tactics I don't think is as utilized is overdrawing. Now, my example to that simply is if you go do your check pass, you have your 1 gold, they have their 1 gold. You're like, look, I'm not paying a gold for Soul Hunter. It's not happening. You check pass, you have 8 cards in hand. They check pass right back because, like, I don't want to play my gold first. You can just waste your turn. Bam, pitch out Soul Hunter.
Oh, I enjoy that idea as well.
Well, but I think to an extent, people are like, well, how do I discard this card? Have 8 cards in hand. There's my answer. Have 8 cards in hand. And also, when Thought Plucker was at its height of popularity, I know I can't like pinpoint a month or a year or whatever, but for a little while there, in Wild Sage decks, it was almost like if you weren't running Thought Hunter, you were either behind the times or you better have more card advantage engines to get on it. Soul Hunter is another card because Thought Plucker. Wow, I'm mixing my words up. But anyway, Thought Plucker is one of those cards. Do you have to have a plan for it? No. It's very nice when you have incidental ones. Like for Kark, for example, they have Bodyguard, they have Inner Peace. They'll pitch them, they'll recall them.
Well, they're also running Marcus for that same idea of if your opponent causes you to discard, you have a great option that comes into play. Granted, he's a 10-10 and has other triggers on him, but being able to go, hey, you made me discard, it really just helped me out, thank you. It's definitely kind of like, it's a nice feeling.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's incidental, and it's one of those things where there aren't any other cards that repeatedly can be used without an affiliation. Like there aren't like most of these cards either have recall, they have some effect from the discard pile where you have to pay a gold for something else for it to trigger, something like that. This simply is, if it's in your discard, beginning your turn, here it comes. Now, yes, if it had blitz or something, so it's more of a byproduct, but it's an attrition card. And people talk about gold punishers and stuff like that. And for those of you that don't, can't break down that phrasing, gold punishers essentially are, if your opponent plays their gold, you either have some sort of trap or answer. A great example would be, say, Erase or Hasty Retreat. If they pay their gold, they come in with a Juggernaut. If you have your gold, you play Erase. You put it back in their hand and you draw 2 cards. So they've spent their 1 gold for the turn, you spent your 1 gold, you prevented the attack, and you drew 2 cards. Gold Punisher. Now, for doing it for free, you have Hasty Retreat. Yes, they'll draw an extra card, kind of, it's sort of a fair trade-off for being a 0, but you set them back their gold on their turn. All their plans were undone by a 0-cost event. Soul Hunter, it can block all day, every day. In fact, it's very happy to block against those wild, base decks that don't have breakthrough. This thing will block a T-Rex, obviously without rage, all day, every day, very happily. And it'll go to the graveyard. It'll do 5 to your opponent. It starts to get them in a race. And so they have to start evaluating. Maybe they have, and the best part, it's actually at its best against T-Rex because T-Rex has to attack. They can't just hold back their turn and pass. T-Rex must attack. So Soul Hunter, it's almost like staple on there. Soul Hunter must block. Because that's what you want to do. You're like, all right, I'll block your T-Rex. Okay, your T-Rex doesn't die, but you take 5. Let's do it again next turn. Nice seeing you.
And while you're at it, I'm happy to not have to spend anything on it further. So it definitely is one of those cards where it does have that weird feeling of, it doesn't get necessarily the threat assessment at the same tier that you would think it should get.
Well, the one of the main parts there is, it's not a threat in the traditional sense. It's a repeatable, and I'm going to use the word attrition again, because all you're doing is blocking over and over and over again. If you're attacking with it, maybe you've done something wrong. Maybe the board's just open. It's very happy to see Evil's board wipes. It's like, oh no, I cast Apocalypse on my own turn. I've lost my Soul Hunter. You take 5. This legitimately happened. I'm setting this board up. I'm grinding it out. I think it was Livius. They did this top 8 deck forever ago. It was absolutely just pro demons out the yin yang. And I go Soul Hunter. They blow them up. Whatever, they're in my discard. Comes back to the beginning of my turn. They're at 10. I have 2 Soul Hunters in play. I play like Apocalypse. I blow up my 2 Soul Hunters. I just deal 10 right to their face. Now, obviously, that is it's a very rare case. But if you start talking about stuff like Frantic Digging, that lets you pitch things and to see a new card, especially since Frantic Digging is a 0. Soul Hunter has some cute synergies, not to the point that it breaks the game, but you throw in, say, Rift Summoner, where it lets you sacrifice a champion to go do this stuff. There's just some really cool things out there where, obviously, I'll go back to my previous rant, that I don't say about, say, Dark Leader. Soul Hunter, because a Sage Evil deck, well, that's probably going to be some form of control or tempo. And if you're running, Frantic Digging, or you're expecting to see a bunch of Thought Pluckers, that's perfectly fine. Throw them in. Maybe it's 1, maybe it's 3 of them. I don't know, but it can do some extra damage that sometimes will end up making them spend their gold first because they need to banish this guy, whether it's from the discard with an Amnesia, whether it's actually using banish effects. I don't think we're ever going to see something like this card again, just because it occupies such a niche part of space where, as you were saying, it's innocuous, but at the same time, if you don't find a way to deal with it, I bet you the player that has it in their deck has a better way to utilize it than you do of dealing with it.
Oh, it definitely falls into that category all too well. And it's one of those kind of. It's such an interesting card with just the ways that you can make it work for you, especially when you're dealing with a discard threat of like psionic assaults and these repeatable effects where you're like, well, I have to discard something. Why not discard this? I know I'm going to get it into play for free, so I negated your discard. Now I'm setting myself up. It kind of lets you get that stabilization recovery, and it may force an suboptimal play of Amnesia, or what's the other one? The
Heinous feast.
Heinous Feast, where they may want to
Yeah,
save that.
hereditary feast.
Yeah, Hereditary Feast. Just feast on the whole bloodline. No, but it may force that where now you're opening up a play for later down the road where they've already gotten rid of what they thought was the key threat, or they had to prioritize it as a threat to now allow you to have more leeway with your discard pile. So, is there any other last card that you want to talk about?
Well, it's up to you, dude. Do you have any? I mean, I literally can. I can. You could actually know what? Lightning round. You get
Sure.
30 seconds. You pick. You pick your opponent's card.
Try
So let me.
horror.
Oh, that's easy, dude. That's really easy. It's really not that good in limited. The reason being that because it has no come into play effect, you need to abuse it. Unlike Soul Hunter, you almost want a way to break it almost immediately, but because it costs 1 gold, if it's not like Rift Summoner, it's actually a liability. If they use Turn and steal it, if they use Helion and steal it, if they use Final Task and steal it from their grave, steal it from your discard pile, and then it breaks and they get 3 more tokens, this thing's a liability. It's up there with the worm, not rampaging. What's the giant doofy one? You know what I'm talking about, the 1818.
Yeah, I know
What's
exactly.
his? I know, burrowing worm. It's up there because while its stats, everything on that card is so tempting. It's what we would call like a Johnny card. You're like, sorry, a Timmy card. Like, this is the greatest thing ever. Until someone steals it and you lose to your own card. Try hard. It's you get such great stats because it's also such a liability. Now, mind you, in limited, if your opponent does, I've seen people nuke the board just because of try hard. They're like, look, we're doing wave of transformation just on try hard because we know this thing is just going to end the game, and you kind of should, otherwise it's going to end it. So that's me rambling on. All right, lightning round. Let me find something terrible. Oh, I know the one. I know the card. I was going to say faint, but faint. Actually, you know what? I'll let you do a quick little tirade. Faint, and no, you can't say just because it draws 2 cards.
Pulling it up here. Give me just a second.
It's in good. It's in good. Because you're like, where is it? You're like, where is this card?
I actually like Fate. It is one of those cards where the fact that it removes all of the attacking or blocking champions from battle and prepares them, I've used it in certain categories where it's like, okay, I need to deal with 2 of your flyers and I only have one on my side. You know what? I'll throw it out. I'll block with my flyer, then I'll remove it from the combat and have it still ready and waiting to deal with your other flyer. This
What?
mainly comes into when having to deal with like Avenging Angel, or even attacking with Avenging Angel, and you have Faint in hand, where you're like, I kind of need to protect it, but they have a blocker that can kill it. Let me bait out that block, pull it back, it's prepared again, ready to go. Now I'm getting Avenging Angel through again.
Now you need to cite one set of rules. What do you need to cite with faint?
In this case, is it that it is no longer allowed to be played and constructed?
No, that's ceasefire.
Okay.
No, breakthrough. If the champion you are blocking has breakthrough and you remove your blocker, they still deal the damage with breakthrough. It's the same thing you have with that freaking wild one, the Spore Beast. Breakthrough will deal damage in excess of the defending creature's defense. But if you remove your blocker, the Crystal Golem trick, if they have breakthrough, they're still going to deal the damage. Now, does this come in often? No, people don't play Feint really. I think limited is probably. I did try playing constructed, and the situations that we could come up with that will make this a game-breaking card are so few and far between. I've burned this card at the end of an opponent's turn just to draw 2 cards so many times that it just almost doesn't come up. The big ones that I would say are things like, say, Juggernaut, or some of these massive attackers. You said Avenging Angel. That's a great example. Absolutely great example. But if you were to use, like, let's say a ton of pump, like, let's say, Go Wild or whatever, you got like this 20/20 attacker. It's, you're going in whatever. You still have your gold. They're like, oh, we're going to block it because it doesn't have break. Remove it from combat, send it in one more time, that sort of thing. And with the draw 2, maybe you draw a Rage, and I understand we're in Magic Christmas land. But if you can make a really huge one-shot attacker that you just need to get through once, and as you said, they have 1 blocker, they have 2 blockers, that sort of stuff, and the same thing with defensively. If they're coming in with, say, Steel Golem, you block, you remove your guy because they can't target Steel Golem. They need some sort of wide sweeping effect. So your chances of surviving a Steel Golem attack are much better. But it's not Dark Leader, but it is probably one of my least favorite good cards. Now, I'm still going to put the caveat on there that I want it to be amazing. So unlike Dark Leader, where I've already given up, this at least has some hope because it does have that draw 2 on there, and it can be used both offensively and defensively in some blowout situations. I'd like to see Feint. But anyway, so while I'm going on my tangent and from keeping Brandon up too late because he's still got to do work in the morning, I'm just stuck with my kids. Yeah, well, we both got our own problems, but you can't yell work away. Like I said, this is a disposable episode. I literally just wanted to babble on about. I mean, when was the last time someone's like, "Hey, I really want someone to talk about Dark Leader and Feint. I need to get this off my chest." I'm like, let's talk about some terrible cards.
The key to Feint really is that it's still a draw 2, so it doesn't hit that part where you just feel bad of like, well, I got 2 zombies or I got
3
really
zombies,
nothing. Yes. Well, one of those zombies had to block, so
yeah. But that's what it is, and compared to, I would argue, any other game that has a constructed element or a limited element, this game doesn't have many duds in the sense that finding a use for them is so hard. I think I probably would argue Dark Leader I'm not to really harp it down. Dark Leader is one of the ones that is so underwhelming because the zombie ones, like I said, you can come up with this crazy scenario. Dark Leader's like, well, include me in a good deck, and you just go, you want me to include an evil card, which means I can't draw off my unicorn. You may include an evil card in my good deck to make my good deck better.
Well, not just good deck, your human good deck, or your human deck.
In which case you go, isn't Feint just better because it draws 2 cards?
Yeah, because either you're building it around because it has to have other human champions, so you're stuck building it around humans. And it's either human good or humans in general, which if you go humans in general, you get like Helion and a few others, but it still hurts.
It does, but I mean, I just thought a goofy episode, as it were. Well, you know what? I'm sure you'll put in the show notes. We need to call this cabin fever discussions because we're at that point where we're almost delirious, but not quite.
Well, sure, that's perfectly fine for the name.
You're totally not going to name it that. You're like, not cabin fever. I'm like, I
No,
hate you.
that'll literally be it. Not Cabin Fever episode
.com.
27 and a half.
Where should we think?
No, it'll be episode 8. Not Cabin Fever.
Yeah, not
Maybe.
cabin fever. Well, I mean, if anyone is listening to this, which I have no faith in whatsoever, thanks for dealing with us. As you can tell, we're just doing this out of having fun and having played some games on a pro-am sort of way of doing things where you feel like you need to get your investment back. It's kind of nice to every now and then just be able to do goofy stuff that kind of matters, but also doesn't kind of matter. Like this week, I literally have cleared out my entire queue of quest decks. I'm now at the point where if a new quest shows up, like I'm gonna play it, and I do it, and it's actually been fun to get back into that. But so make sure you're still having fun with it on, in my opinion, in a non-competitive fashion where you don't feel like you need to qualify for something. It's not like, oh, get golden ticket if I don't, get up to the next level of, lifetime constructed or whatever. Have fun with this, especially since a lot of us are cooped up. Don't stress yourself out. That's probably one of the worst things. I had that problem playing a lot of online first-person shooters. You can get yourself so wound up that it's as bad as a job, except you're not getting paid for it. So make sure you still kind of enjoy the game. And I'm lucky that Brandon and I can still talk and, have fun with this. So not cabin fever. Brandon, your thoughts?
Well, to me, it's also the only way to get past the idea that there are only 3 or 4 established pillars are to take a look at some of those awkward cards that may or may not see play and go, well, what could I do with them? Or in what situations are they good? Or maybe this is a card I do want to try and build something around. And you may make the new deck that everyone now has to deal with because you found that you really wanted to play Soul Hunter, and you really wanted to play a Sage Evil deck that's more around discarding your own stuff for value while making your opponent discard stuff to set yourself into a position. So take a time to look at the cards that you may not play as often and have an idea of what they are, maybe make your own threat assessment for them and come up with your own opinions on them because that's the only way you're going to advance further in the game. Because at a certain point, you hit a brick wall where you can't get any further unless you start thinking for yourself.
Wow, that got a little spiritual quickly. No, it's a very good ending, and I'll let Brandon have the final word. I'll sign out because I need to, at this point, make sure my kids are cleaning up everything, and I need to help them out with that. So, Brandon, close us out.
Well, as I usually say, tell your friends about the game. That way you have more people to play with that you're friendly. Tell your enemies about the game so that you can beat them. And if you can't beat them, we'll beat them for you. Definitely send all of those challenge requests to NightHydra. He really likes them. He'll definitely accept them and never reject them. But like, share, and subscribe. Thank you guys. Have a good night.